Thank you. Yeah, I have a quick question. Kathy mentioned the Clean Water Act, and it's my understanding that the current administration is doing what it can to roll back some of the protections in the Clean Water Act. So to what extent are actions on the on the part of the federal government having a deleterious impact now on the Clean Water Act, and also just bearing in mind, to whatever extent it's relevant, that we are going to be having elections in November, and we have at least one congressman, a senator, and of course the president, who may or may not be particularly enthusiastic about taking care of the water quality in this area.
Kathy, you want to comment?
Yeah, I think anytime there's a rollback on state or federal rules that protect our water quality, it's going to have a harmful effect on our local resources. That's kind of, our local resources are our waters of the United States. The waters and the wetlands, those really belong to all of us. So I'm concerned whenever I hear about that. I'm not here to advocate for any political party or anything like that. I can't do that. That's not what my job allows. But I would take it very seriously. And the Water Keepers, as I mentioned, has some opportunities for involvement. And there may be a lot of other groups that are involved in that too. I would think of the Healing Our Waters Coalition that deals with the Great Lakes in particular also would be a good contact for you if you want to find out more what you can do about it. But definitely serious. I would always be very concerned whenever some of these protections are being rolled back.
Eric, you want to take a question, or Ashley, either one of you that came up that you want to address?
I picked here 2 water level questions. So one is, why would the water level be higher than ever on an inland spring-fed lake? The other is, given the current lake levels, is this a cycle or is it something we should be concerned about? So you can see that water does absolutely go in a cycle. It's dictated. A lot of our climate is by, for El Nino and these different cyclical weather climate events that influence our weather and our water levels. Something to be concerned about. Well, one thing that is a little different is we are seeing higher precipitation. With higher precipitation input, then that increases water levels. So we are at a high, I guess higher than average, as you saw in that one figure. So as far as we should be concerned about, I think we should be informed. We should know that the lakes are a dynamic system, and shorelines are dynamic, and they're volatile, and they're not going to stay the same. So I think going forward, the adaptation is to build with that in mind, with a lot of buffer there. Start to think about how do we engineer maybe more, moving our dwellings away from the lake instead of trying to control the shoreline. Would be one. So be informed more than concerned, I would say, on that. And then water levels, why would it be higher in a spring-fed lake? And just going to the water inputs. It's been high precipitation, and that's dictating. Did you have something to add to that one?
Yeah, the quick one. Can you guys hear me okay if I stop it? Oh, wow. Yeah.
I didn't realize that was there. So Springfed Lake is exactly what Ashley said. So we've had, I didn't put it in the climate change slide progression that I had, but our precipitation is increasing as well. And so when precipitation is high through year after year, that starts to influence our groundwater, and we might have more groundwater now flowing into that spring-fed lake. Now, there's lots of depends, like what aquifer is it tapped into and all these sorts of things. So I can't definitively say, but that's what we see.
Eric, on the same notion, what about lawn fertilizer and weed treatment for lakeshore owners?
Oh, so all lawn things. Yeah, so we have there's plenty of research out there to show that when we put down nutrient fertilizer, so fertilizers onto our shoreline, that if it's sloped, it's likely to get into our surface water. Also, there's lots of different dynamics here. So there is a law in place that restricts the use of phosphorus fertilizers on your shoreline. So there are ways you can still use it, like if you're trying to establish a lawn and some other things, but mostly phosphorus should not be used on the shoreline of a water body. Nitrogen is commonly used, a nitrogen fertilizer. Nitrogen can easily mobilize with rainwater, and or if it reaches groundwater, so the water table, it can also quickly move in. And when we talk about the most limiting nutrients for lakes, it's usually phosphorus and nitrogen, or both at the same time. And so we talk a lot about phosphorus, but we also need to talk about other nutrients like nitrogen as well.
Speaking of groundwater, I was at Armstrong's Bait and Tackle. They have 5 or 6 pumps going daily to keep their store from being flooded now. And Matt showed me some holes in the floor, and the groundwater is just this far below his concrete slab for his building. He's in the lowest building in our White Lake area, and I'm thinking, and he said when there's a wind off the lake, it increases and builds floods right up the side of his building wall because the water's pushed against the 6-7 miles of White Lake or whatever we have here. So, all right, another question. Can I throw in out walleye or perch populations in Lake Michigan, salmon populations and trout populations? Ashley, do you talk about that at NOAA, or
About,
are salmon going down, trout going up, and perch staying the same, or how are we doing out in the big lake for fishing?
I'm not as clear on perch. I haven't been tracking those as closely, but certainly lake trout are rising. Doesn't require as much stocking for lake trout. Salmon are more dependent on stocking. So one of the debates is, how much are we going to be stocking lake trout versus salmon? But certainly lake trout is doing much better.
Yeah, okay. Other questions?
There's more on the board there.
Yes. Help us out on the board if you want. Oh, you got one here? Explain how White Lake and our Lake Michigan shoreline are currently being monitored. Anyone?
I'll do the White Lake part first, but I need to ask Tom Tissue, did you guys do Score the Shore on White Lake? No, okay. So please explain how White Lake its shoreline is being monitored. It I guess isn't being monitored. That's the quick part of it. There still might be monitoring for specific things, like if a new septic system is being put in, they would look at that. But I asked Tom because Tom has been integral in monitoring Duck Lake and White Lake through the Cooperative Lakes Monitoring Program, which is a citizen science program. And there's also other White Lake folks I think I saw in here. And so they've helped with monitoring shorelines. There's a program that helps monitoring the shoreline. The thing is with White Lake is it's a giant shoreline, so it's a tremendous amount of effort.
Monitoring for what?
So they're monitoring for basic data. Are there aquatic plants? Are there trees? Is there cover? Is there erosion? How many houses? How many docks? Kind of like that.
Kathy wants to dovetail on that.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say that with all the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funding that has restored habitat along the shorelines in all the Great Lakes states, EPA and NOAA and other agencies are really interested in figuring out some kind of a long-term monitoring program for that purpose, to make sure that all the investment that we put in through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative is working. And when you get a grant to do a project, you only get it maybe for 3 years, and then there's no more money for monitoring, right? So I think it's really important, and I don't know if I want to say that we need more funding for that purpose, but I know that there are many agencies that are very interested in figuring out a way to continue to do more of that kind of long-term ecological monitoring.
You want to add to your question?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. My question really was about the water quality at the shoreline, because so much of the algae and everything is there. So you addressed the shoreline itself, and I meant to hear more about the water quality of the shoreline.
So with monitoring water quality, I'll let somebody else talk about that, I guess. But with the ecological monitoring for fish and wildlife habitat, it would include underwater plants. And usually they take some water quality sampling measurements along with macrophytes and emergent wetland plants and things like that.
But there isn't any right now in White Lake.
So the only thing that I'm aware of in White Lake, and others might be a little bit more privy on it, is there was so EGLE. So that used to be the DEQ. So EGLE is the Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. It's the department within the state, and they were called out because of a potential cyanobacteria bloom. And so they came out on the lake and collected water samples to analyze if it was a cyanobacteria. And I don't know if they did a toxin testing as well, but I think they did as well. And so that was probably near the shoreline because cyanobacteria blooms can easily get pushed near the shore. And so that was something, but that had to be called in. So that's not a regular thing. There was concern that it was a blue green algae bloom, a cyanobacteria bloom, and they came out and tested.
And a lot of the public beaches sometimes can get money for monitoring because the Michigan Community Health Department will fund those kinds of things through Eagle and local universities and county health departments. But if it's not a public beach, it's generally not monitored for water quality.
Can I ask a dumb question to anyone? Where's White Lake and Muskegon Lake in terms of being delisted? I've kind of lost track on who got delisted.
White Lake.
And where's Muskegon Lake at in this process?
So there's one more large-scale contaminated sediment cleanup project to be done on Muskegon Lake, and we call it Ryerson because it's near where Ryerson Creek enters Muskegon Lake. And it's really the smallest of all of the 4 contaminated sediment cleanups that were done on Muskegon Lake, and you can read about all of them if you go to greatlakesmud.org. There are 4, I like to call them the final 4, habitat restoration projects underway now on Muskegon Lake. One is being done at the former Amoco Tank Farm along the Lakeshore Trail down in the Lakeside neighborhood on the south side of the lake. Another one is at the Muskegon Lake Nature Preserve where the river comes into Muskegon Lake. The Lower Muskegon River Habitat Project is just upstream from that on the river itself near where the old Zephyr Oil Refinery operated. And then the 4th one, Veterans Memorial Park. So that one is still underway and not completed yet. But if you were there all last summer since Memorial Day, it's all been beautiful and open to the public.
Sir, follow up if you will.
I heard that you mentioned, now that you mentioned the Veterans Memorial Park, because the dam was taken out, you couldn't control the water level. Now there's a dam been put in there, and I heard someplace that it was supposed to be a fish-friendly dam.
Yeah, it's not a dam. It's a structure that has boards in it that you can take out. The previous one that was in there before had swollen old wood boards. It was put in the 70s, and they were never able to take the boards out. So now the new one has fiberglass boards, so they won't swell up, right? So under high water conditions like we've had for the last couple of years, and we may have for a few years, we don't know, those boards can stay in.